48, 47, Uno, 48, 46, Penn, 48, 48. This UFC lightweight championship fight is considered a draw.
This is a moment that we often talk about in our videos here at MMA On Point, the beginning of a painful process for the UFC to put a pause on their UFC lightweight title. Following his win over BJ Penn at UFC 35 on January 11th, 2002, Jens Pulver, the #1 lightweight MMA fighter in the world, would shake up the entire sport when he was stripped of the title following contractual disputes, and then ultimately he exited from the UFC. And unable to place the belt back on a fighter following the draw of Penn and Uno at the culmination of a tournament to replace him, title aspirations would cease to be for lightweight fighters hoping to climb to the top of the ladder in the UFC. It would be 3.5 years later until the return of the title with Sean Sherk's win over Kenny Florian at UFC 64 in 2006, and the return of a UFC champion to the top of the rankings. But a story less told here is what exactly did the rankings look like during the title hiatus? Who was considered the best in the world during that outage? Which unlikely fighters claimed the top spot, and how did that battle play out when the UFC couldn't claim dominance? I'm Tom from MMA On Point, thanks always to our Hall of Famers, and this is the battle for the best in the world. The chaos of the UFC lightweight division, no one benefited more than Jens Pulver. The champion who hadn't lost his belt now took the #1 ranking along with him to new promotions. And Jens was in demand, and he began to book up. His first fight outside of the promotion was against a debuting Rob Emerson, only just recently being released from jail and making his first ever walk to the cage. And what should have been a tune-up fight ended up being a bit more of a struggle than Pulver probably would have hoped for.
By Emerson, good punch by Emerson. High kick, partially blocked. Evil comes back with some of his own. Knees now, really trading knees. Good flurry by Emerson. Nice high kick. Good flurry, nice!
Nevertheless, he took the unanimous decision victory that night, but it was a bad sign of what was to come with his dominance atop of the rankings. In his third fight of the year, halfway through the year, Jens would take on Takehiro Murahama at the Tokyo Dome for Antonio Inoki's 2002 event, The World's Strongest Legend.
So we're at the top of the mezzanine. Jens is eating chicken. And so we drop everything, we go running down, run in the back, doesn't wrap his hands, just throws the gloves on, no warm up, nothing, goes running into the ring.
He was able to squeeze by Murahama that night to close out 2002 with his #1 spot intact, but come the new year and mid-2003, Jens would be out of the top 10 entirely. And the man to knock him off that top spot was none other than Duane "Bang" Ludwig. Despite being on a 4-fight win streak, Ludwig hadn't fought in MMA for 2 years. He had been exclusively fighting for K1, where he was the K1 World Max 2002 USA champion. The consensus was if Pulver could get that fight down to the ground, the TKO lightweight title would be another title that he could add to his collection. But it was the first exchange that completely rattled Pulver.
Handling here, just feeling out processes. Pulver, oh man! Pulver might be out right now! Oh my Lord! Jens Pulver just rolled out of the ring!
For Ludwig, the win was significant.
I was pretty sure I'd get the knockout, but as far as that quick, no way. It was a dream, and it came true, so I was happy about it.
The UFC even offered him a fight right off the back, changing his life in the process forever, and having not been ranked in the lightweight rankings, he now took a #4 spot. For Pulver, it was his first loss in 7 fights in 2 years, and knocked him off the top spot only for a young Takanori Gomi to claim the throne. While North America was establishing its lightweight division within the world of mixed martial arts in the early 2000s, Shuto over in Japan had already been nurturing the division. The likes of Carl Uno and Dean Thomas had already made a name for themselves here before debuting in the UFC, and one talent the UFC weren't able to convince to come over was a young, unsuspecting fighter called Takanori Gomi. Having made his debut in 1998 whilst Pulver, Penn and Uno battled over the top spot, he had quietly amassed an undefeated record of 14-0. And what kept Gomi from the top spot all those years was the fact that he wasn't finishing fights. Out of 14 fights, 9 of those were decisions. and it wasn't until Pulver had such a devastating round 1 KO loss to an unranked Ludwig that he finally took the top spot. That spot, however, did not last long as August 2003 rolled around and Gomi would suffer his first professional loss in a close and controversial decision to Joaquin Hansen.
眼底骨折を負って試合を続けていたということもちょっと驚くとしてたので、それ良かったんですけども、これ戻られるときついですよね。私もね。スリーパー。残り入ってますね。第2座2連発。
allowing for Ludwig to close out 2003 with a top spot in hand, following his win against Genki Sudo at UFC 42. And how can we forget about Jens? Well, all in all, 2003 was a pretty terrible year for Jens Pulver, having started off at number 1. With hopes of trying to bounce back against the Ludwig loss, a shock loss to Jason Maxwell completely blew him out of the top 10.
You know, after the fight there, I was going, you know, we didn't see that coming, and he wasn't going to fight. He was in the back saying, I don't have to do this. You can't make me do it. He put it together, but he came out, and nothing against him, but he was scared.
And it seemed like a new era for lightweight was among us. And that new era was seemingly being etched outside of the UFC by a 4-time World Jiu-Jitsu champion Vitor Ribeiro, taking medals in 5 consecutive World IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu championships from 1996 to 2001. A transition over to MMA seemed like the only logical move for the accomplished grappler. Making his debut at the first World Fighting Alliance event in 2001, nicknamed Shaolin, Ribeiro made quick work of Charlie Cola a staple among the early Californian no-holds-bar scene. With the win, it didn't take long for Japan to take notice, especially after in his second fight putting Takumi Nakayama to sleep with only a minute. And this was his second fight, let me just say. Over the next 2 years, Ribeiro would rack up a streak of 9 straight wins, culminating by winning the Shuto Lightweight Championship, submitting Joaquin Hansen.
Visit the islands of Hawaii, our Hawaii.
Recently a free agent following his unsuccessful UFC title bid against Kara Uno. Looking back now, it's amazing to think that a fight of this caliber was happening outside of the UFC. 2 of the best in the world fighting for K1 for the inaugural Rumble on the Rock lightweight title. And with something to prove and a boatload of aggression, BJ Penn was just merciless.
BJ's so incredibly flexible, it's very difficult to get him off the back. The whole crowd behind BJ right here. Nice big takedown by BJ. Huge elbows. Nice combination, right, left hook.
Left hook by BJ Penn. Look, BJ landing those short right hands on the inside, dirty boxing.
Watch for Gomi to explode. There it is. He locked it in. Mataleo's locked in. Is he gonna tap? He's gonna go sleep.
Did he tap? Unbelievable! BJ Penn has done it. He's tapped Gomi. Naked choke. Unbelievable.
He beat Gomi both on the feet and the ground, ultimately leading him to a rear naked choke finish. His dominance was clear and untethered, leading him on a tirade of open weight destruction. He wanted everyone at any time, at any weight, in any promotion. Following the Gomi win, he ripped the UFC welterweight title from Matt Hughes, put a stop to Duane Ludwig's streak at welterweight, handed Higiro Gracie his first ever loss at middleweight, and went back and forth with a heavyweight Lyoto Machida, who weighed in at 225 for their historical openweight bout, before claiming his second Gracie at light heavyweight only a few months later. This BJ Penn was absolutely absurd, and he wouldn't return to the lightweight division until 2007. So by the end of middle 2004, BJ Penn was gone from the rankings entirely, and with Duane's one and only MMA fight in 2004, a welterweight loss to BJ Penn, Vitor Ribeiro emerged as the #1 in the world midway through 2004 with his 10th straight win over Mitsuhiro Ishida. With BJ Penn on an open-weight side quest, Dwayne Ludwig going up to welterweight, it seems that finally the lightweight division had a stable #1 in the world, a Shuto champion that had no signs of slowing down. Or so we thought. With the lack of a major presence in the UFC, Pride decided to take it upon themselves that Pride was the place to be for any lightweight fighters in the world looking to establish themselves as the best in the world, and for Takanori Gomi, this was the perfect place to reintroduce himself following the back-to-back losses against Joaquin Hansen and BJ Penn. And holy shit was it an ascension year for Takanori Gomi. 5 fights and 5 finishes, culminating with a huge KO over Jens Pulver. His 2004 was entirely dedicated to reclaiming his top spot in the rankings, and he wasn't the only one. Whilst Ribeiro and Gomi were racking up wins every few months, a new gladiator was making a name for himself with 7 fights in 2003 and a 3-fight one-night tournament to kick off his 2004.
You do have a name.
Marcus Maximus Aurelio was amassing an impressive record for himself, so much so that his one-night tournament win immediately bumped him into 3rd place on the lightweight rankings midway through 2004. Another man who benefited from the 2004 tournaments was Ryan Schultz in Super Brawl. The WEC vet entered the one-night tournament picking up 3 straight wins and finishing the night by handing Roger Huerta his first ever loss.
Nice right hand comes in. Both fighters total to action right here. Shucks out of that. Says he's done.
With 10 fights in 2004, finishing the year with 3 straight TKO victories, Schultz also found himself in the heat of it all. As well as Aurelio in ZST and Schultz at Super Bowl, Joe Stevenson, a multiple promotional welterweight champion, dropped down to secure the King of the Cage lightweight championship, and by the end of 2004, he was on a 7-fight winning streak with a record of 23 wins and 6 losses. It's mad to think he had amassed such a record since 1999. The King of the Cage title win catapulted him to #4 on the rankings, and suddenly everything was to play for. And with all the pressure on his shoulders, with fighters breathing down his neck for that top spot, Vitor Ribeiro took a shock loss against a fighter he had previously beaten, Tatsuya Kawajiri, in an absolutely raucous end of the year show main event that had Japanese fans going wild. With Vitor losing, Marcus Aurelio looked set to take the top spot, but a shock loss in his debut in Pride stopped him in his tracks. This is madness. So who emerged as the best in the world come 2005? Surely Gomi, surely Stevenson. Surprisingly, whilst the best of the best were competing in Pride or Shuto, Yves Edwards was rebuilding the UFC lightweight division, delivering iconic fights and KOs, and ultimately hold the top spot until mid-2005. And with the UFC without a title, his knockout win against Josh Thompson awarded Edwards with the title of uncrowned lightweight champion of the UFC. With a record of 38-1, Edwards had fought everywhere. The activity in the 7-fight win streak seemed to be enough for the 2004 underdog to reign supreme. So Gomi was bypassed, and with Stevenson choosing to compete in TUF Season 2 at welterweight, all roads led to finally determining a true #1 when Pride cemented themselves as the place to be when Edwards left the UFC to compete in the 2005 Pride Lightweight Grand Prix and the inaugural Pride Lightweight Championship. Sakurai Pulver, Hansen Edwards, Gomi Kawajiri, and Azaredo Katane to finally determine the true #1. Despite Aurelio glaringly missing from the tournament and Ribeiro choosing Cage Rage over Pride, the hope was that we'd see Edwards and Gomi in the final, but Joaquin Hansen put an immediate stop to that, halting all promise for the uncrowned UFC lightweight champion in a split decision loss. And with that, the path was clear for Gomi. having taken out Karajiri, Azaredo, and ultimately and emphatically Sakurai with a beautiful KO to reclaim his spot at the top of the rankings, now with a major title in hand. Of course, before he completely cemented himself as the top lightweight in the world, there was a matter of Marcus Aurelio waiting on the sideline, and the beginning of a small chaotic scramble. Since his debut loss, Aurelio had racked up back-to-back wins, and his non-title bout against the champion Gome just seemed like a formality really for Gome. But in a stunning turn of events and a huge upset, Aurelio handed Gome his first Pride loss, putting him unconscious in the first round. But due to the non-title circumstance, Gome held on to his top spot, and because, Pride matchmaking, instead of an instant rematch for the title, Aurelio took a fight against Mitsuhiro Yoshida and lost via decision.
You think that killing those guys is funny?
I do.
I mean, the whole situation was a complete mess, with Gome himself looking irritated in the crowd. And with the win over Aurelio, Ishida would leapfrog Gome to take the #1 spot. The contender was now #1 in the world because Gome had lost to Aurelio and Aurelio had now lost to Ishida. This was nuts.
We need to fix this.
And again, because, Pride matchmaking, despite this loss, Pride rematch Gome and Aurelio together next, this time for the belt. I mean, how you get a title shot off of a loss, I don't know, but, there you go. Ultimately, Gome did come away with a split decision win, so at Pride Shockwave to end the year, Gome would put the division back in order when he TKO'd Ishida to reclaim that #1 spot at the end of 2006. With the success of The Ultimate Fighter in 2005, MMA started to see a global shift back to the competitiveness of North America. The UFC and other organisations like Strikeforce and Elite XC were finally coming around, and whilst Gome had been dominating in Japan, champions like Gilbert Melendez and Sean Sherk had burst onto the scene in the US. And at the start of 2007, Melendez and Sherk took their spots at 2 and 3 after Melendez won the Strikeforce lightweight title from Clay Guida, and Sherk being crowned the first UFC lightweight champion in a few years. And for the first time in a long time, the lightweight division was once again heating up in an inter-promotional way, especially with the return of BJ Penn to the division following his UFC welterweight run, and the arrival of submission specialist and Shuto welterweight champion Shinya Aoki throughout 2007. The renewed and thriving division was becoming a haven for competitors to cut to 155, so guys like Kenny Florian and Joe Stevenson really started to find their place there. Ultimately, as the story goes, Pride would be acquired by the UFC, and Gome's long dominance at the top of the lightweight rankings would naturally come to its end after back-to-back losses in Sengoku, and BJ Penn would finally claim the top spot to bring the UFC champion back to the #1 spot, where it remains to this day. Huge shout out to Luke Taylor for making me look good with those sweet visuals. You can follow him at cooltome_ on all the socials, and also you can check out Charlie and Luke, his YouTube channel, where he's making some of the best content there is on the goddamn platform. Again, as always, I just want to say a big shout out to our Hall of Famers. If you want to see more content like this, if you want to see 2 unedited podcasts a week, you can join the membership program for as little as $2.99. Of course, there's lots of other exciting things that you can get on the membership. But anyways, I'm rambling. You get out of here. As always, like and subscribe. Haven't done that for a while. And enjoy your week.